Okay, let's talk about the Palace streetcars running in New Orleans from 1902 to 1935. So this is our progression. We've the single truck streetcars did the deed, but now the streetcar operations are getting to be much the number of people riding the streetcar is increasing. We needed bigger and more efficient streetcars. So here we go. The Palace cars were some of the early double truck streetcars. I am, of course, Edward Brandley, the NOLA History Guy. And there's my email. Hunt me down, ask me questions, book me for a speaker. Please, please love to talk to your group, that kind of stuff. So the Palace streetcars come from St. Louis, from the St. Louis Car Company in 1902. Now remember, St. Louis Car Company was that first company to sell electric streetcars to in New Orleans, so that there was a relationship there already. And they designed this semi-convertible double truck streetcar design that everyone's raving about. I mean, to just you got to read some of just the descriptions that Hennick and Charlton give about these cars. Just an incredibly smooth ride, well built, kind of steady, just comfortable for it's like you live down in mid city and you're riding up, or you live you're heading out to Old Metairie on the Napoleon line. It was comfortable, that kind of thing. This is streetcar 701 running. This particular photo is from 1918, so it's New Orleans Railway and Light. You can see it's they're big, they're a smooth ride and running on the high volume Canal Esplanade belt system. You see right behind it there is an arch roof. That's one of the first Southern Car Company arch roof cars. There was that 416 running right behind it on a different line. Shout out to the Friends of the Cabildo tour guides with the best French Quarter walking tour in town. And here's our tour guide talking points. Streetcar routes expanded double truck cars in the early 1900s. We had the original St. Louis single trucks, the 1894 Brills, the Ford Bacon and Davis cars, but they were small. They only held about 40 passengers. So there was a need to step that up, increase capacity, as well as, basically cars that could run a little faster, a little more efficient on the various routes. The single truck streetcars continued. I mean, we see the transit company buying the Palace car, they were buying Brill semi-convertibles. They were buying the Palace cars, buying the arch roof cars, but the single truck cars, in particular the Ford Bacon and Davises, continued on the backatown lines. So you had the main artery lines like Canal and St. Charles running the double truck cars, and then you could transfer off to the backatown lines to head back closer to your home. The first double truck cars are Brill semi-convertibles that we'll talk about in part 4. And then, of course, here are the Palace cars. The Palace streetcars were manufactured by St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri. And, of course, the name comes because it was such an elegant ride. They said, this is like being in a palace. And that was the idea. That was the big selling point. They were originally purchased by the city in 1902. That was the New Orleans City Railway Company. But the second incarnation, the first had gone bankrupt because of electrification. But after New Orleans Traction Company, then New Orleans City Railway, and then eventually all comes into New Orleans Public Service. They first operated on the Canal Belt when the company took delivery, after there were enough Palace cars in New Orleans. Then they were added to the Esplanade line, and the Canal and Esplanade ran in belt service. The Palaces also did duty on Dauphine, Magazine, and Britannia, and later on the Napoleon line, the Royal Blue Line. Their success in New Orleans, like I say, they just, once they got started down here in 1902 and then belt service in 1903, they were also used at the Louisiana Purchase Centennial Exposition, the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. And basically, they ran 10 miles of streetcar track around the World's Fair grounds, the exposition grounds, and the palace cars ran that route. The palace cars received extensive damage in the transit strike in 1929 because they were in heavy rotation on Canal and Esplanade and ran out of Canal Station down at Canal Street in North White. So there was a lot of strike-related violence and vandalism that rocked a whole bunch of these cars. Eventually, the R-Truth streetcars replaced the palace cars. By 1922-23, the New Orleans Public Service stops ordering the palace cars, and they go full on with the R-Truth streetcars, and that's the story from there on out. The palace cars left Nopsey service in 1935. The canal, the belt service was discontinued in 31. The remaining palace cars ran on Canal until 1935, and then the Canal line was converted to the 800, 900 series R-Truths. So let's talk about the palace cars now in a little bit of detail. Again, they're designed by the St. Louis Car Company in 1901. They're looking at these as they're pitching this to the World's Fair people, and they've got a relationship with New Orleans, so they pitch them to New Orleans City Railroad Company, who purchases them in 1902. The streetcar itself is a wood frame structure on a steel underframe. It's got the big monitor deck that you can see there. It's a semi-convertible double truck car that's got you can see it's got the two trolley poles, so it's a double-ended. You didn't have to turn it around on a turntable or go around on the block or something like that. Seating capacity of 52, and then you could always, of course, have folks standing in the aisleway. This is a 1916 shot of car 12012. At this point now, the operating company is New Orleans Railway and Light, which took over from New Orleans City Railroad in 1905. So here's a shot as delivered by, this is New Orleans City Railroad 043. This is what the cars looked like as they were delivered from the St. Louis Car Company. So, we can see we can see the car as they originally came to New Orleans. Now, at this point, you can see that it's an open vestibule car. So it's a little bit different in that respect. It's an open vestibule car, double truck like we're used to seeing. You can see those grills that are put in front of the windows. That's anticipating because they're running on, in particular, because they were going to run on the Esplanade line, and the Esplanade neutral ground had a good bit of old trees that they didn't want to just hack down. So here is a shot of another palace, or actually a pair of palace cars. One is coming at us in the 100 block of North Rampart Street with some nurses dressed up, some sort of fundraiser type thing at right around carnival time. So you can see they're leaning against that gate grill because it's still an open vestibule car. So this is a palace car. This is 025 running on the Dauphine line. So the Dauphine streetcar ran into town on Dauphine Street and then circled around to Rampart and ran back out and then reconnected with Dauphine. So because Dauphine was a one-way street, not the streetcar couldn't handle turning around, but the traffic pattern at the time, the French Quarter streets, well, still are set up to be one-way streets. So this is on Rampart now. This is on Rampart Street in the 100 block. You can see there's another palace that's going inbound that's heading. He's getting ready to come in, likely either on, well, he's either on the Dauphine line or on the Esplanade belt, and he's going to make the left turn onto Canal Street to restart his run at Canal Liberty Place. We talked about the 1904 World's Fair, the official name, the Louisiana Purchase Centennial Exposition. Remember, the Louisiana Purchase was signed, sealed, and delivered at the end of 1803. So in 1904, St. Louis promoted a World's Fair with the theme of 100 years of the Louisiana Purchase. One of the things the St. Louis Car Company pitched the festival organizers was, let us set up a streetcar route on the perimeter of the fairgrounds. And you can see a whole bunch. We've got this map on the show page in the PDF. If you want some more detail, you can see it's a visitor map with all the index, just like what you'd expect from a paper map. And if we zoom in a little bit on that green section in the bottom right corner, you can see a whole bunch of little lines that are the streetcar. That's the representation of the streetcar tracks on the map. If you look on the bottom right side of the map, you see where it says intramural railway. That was the Palace Car streetcar run around the perimeter of the 1904 World's Fair. And again, these were incredibly popular cars because they were such a smooth ride. And naturally, the St. Louis Car Company was very excited to put these cars into the World's Fair because they had made their pitch and was successful in New Orleans. Naturally, they wanted to sell this design to other cities. So remember Streetcar 701? Here's the blueprint of 701. Well, first, I'll take a step back. We had that car on the Dauphine line with the nurses. And remember, that was an open vestibule. So by 1918, the cars were remodeled so that the operator no longer stood in, the motorman and the conductor no longer stood in an open vestibule environment, but that was closed in. Better for the weather, better for the rain, all that kind of stuff. You see the big monitor deck there? It's a two-truck semi-convertible design, just incredibly smooth. So by 1918, the New Orleans Railway and Light Company not only remodeled the Palace cars, they also renumbered the cars so that by this point, instead of the basic numbers of 01 to 020, 045, these smaller numbers, they were running now as 600 series and 700 series cars. That's kind of a sanity check because the R-Truth cars were running as the 400 series at that point, and then the Brill cars were running as 500s, so that these were renumbered to be the 6 and 700s. So this is courtesy of Hennick and Charlton. It's a NOPSI blueprint. They cite NOPSI, but the date, because it's a 1918 rebuild, this was done by New Orleans Railway and Light. The big heavy lifting for the Palace streetcars was done on the Canal Esplanade belts. And now we did a whole pod on belt service, like pod number 10. I'll put it on the show page, riding the belt. Because, well, particularly, I was inspired to do that because of Earl Higgins and his book, The Joy of Yacht Catholicism, where Earl talks about he talks about riding the belt, the Tulane and St. Charles Avenue belt, where you paid 7 cents, and he was a Loyola student. He could read and study and just go around and around and around. But the belt service also ran for Canal, and the concept of belt service was simple. You took two lines that basically could connect to each other, and then you ran one line in one direction. Basically, you ran one line clockwise, one line counterclockwise so that the two lines, the streetcars running on the respective lines didn't change direction. You know how now basically a canal car goes up to the river, it pull down one pole, put up the other pole, reverse the direction, and then it heads out to the cemetery. And then, well, the cemetery, they when they used to you do the same thing, now they can turn around in the U-turn. But that's the but with belt service, the idea was you didn't just turn around and go back; you circled around. So on the canal belt, the way that worked was the streetcar started at Liberty Place at that terminal that we talked about last time, designed by Ford, Bacon, and Davis. The streetcar headed outbound, headed up Canal Street to City Park Avenue. But instead of stopping there and changing directions, it made a right turn onto City Park Avenue. So it turned right, went out City Park Avenue past, basically past what's now Delgado Junior College, then up into City Park, going in that direction. When it got to the Bayou, it made that little bit of a curve onto Wisner and then onto the Esplanade Bridge. Not the Magnolia Bridge, mind you, not the Bayou Bridge, which didn't support streetcars, but the bigger, newer bridge that directly connected City Park and Esplanade Avenue. So the streetcar curved off of City Park Avenue, made a little bit of a left, then made a right, and went down Esplanade back into town. The streetcar got to North Rampart Street, made a right turn. You saw the streetcars on Rampart Street there, so they made the right turn onto North Rampart, went to Canal, made a left turn onto Canal, and headed back to Liberty Place. The Esplanade line essentially did the opposite, so that an Esplanade car would start at Canal and the river at that Liberty Place terminal. It went up Canal like it's heading toward the cemeteries, but when it got to North Rampart Street, it made a right turn, and that was that one with the nurses that you saw. Well, he was running on the Dauphine line, but that's what the Esplanade line did, was it made that right turn onto Rampart and went down Rampart Street outbound until it hit Esplanade and North Rampart. Shout out to Brothers of the Sacred Heart in New Orleans, because that's where that was where St. Aloysius was, and the Esplanade streetcar was a big deal for a lot of those guys that were attending what becomes my old school. So the belt, then the Esplanade line. So basically, on Esplanade Avenue, the Canal line's coming into town. The Esplanade line is going out back toward the Bayou. It got to the Bayou, it crossed the bridge, made a left turn onto Wisner, curved around City Park onto City Park Avenue. Then it went inbound went on, as if it was going uptown, if you will, to Canal Street, made the left turn at Canal and City Park Avenue, and then headed inbound toward the river, then the Esplanade car. So if you were, let's say, at Canal and Carrollton and you wanted to go into town, you would get on the Esplanade car and go into town. If you wanted to go Carrollton to City Park, you got on the Canal car and you went to the cemeteries. The belt service ran from 1903. In other words, as soon as there were enough Palace cars in New Orleans, both lines ran Palace cars in belt service. That ran until 1931. In 1931, NOPSI converted the Esplanade line to buses, and they cut back Canal, so the Palace cars only ran point to point. They ran river to cemeteries on the Canal line. So this is a photo of what is now NOPSI 647 after the strike in 1929 was settled. So this is August 20th, 1929, and belt service is back in operation. Here is Palace Car 630 running on the Canal belt. You can see the Canal roll sign there. So it's running on the Canal belt. You can see it's got the open vestibule still hasn't done the rebuild, so you can kind of you see the motorman in the front, you see the conductor kind of hanging out the back there a little bit. This car is on City Park Avenue, and if you look right behind the motorman, you see the arch for the main entrance of City Park there. And then you see the cowcatcher that we saw in the Ford Bacon and Davis cars as well. So this is 1915. It's running on its running belt service, heading out. It's passing City Park Avenue. It's going to get to the end of the park there at the Bayou, then make that little left turn, little right turn, and then off he'll go back down Esplanade. There's a set of photos that we'll probably do as a piece of another streetcar pod somewhere along the line. Um, if you look in the bottom right hand corner of this photo, it kind of tells the story. This was one of a series of photos shot on the Esplanade neutral ground on October 8th of 1921. So this is still New Orleans Railway and Light. And what happened was there was a complaint, a lawsuit or a complaint, probably a lawsuit if the because this is that's a Frank Studios notation with a court docket number that somebody must have been claimed to be injured by a streetcar on Esplanade. So the company took this streetcar. This was New Orleans Railway Light 605, Palace 605. And they ran it up and down Esplanade to photograph and check the clearance of those trees so they could introduce that into evidence and say, no, the tree didn't interfere with the streetcar at all. So again, this is 1921, still the Canal and the Esplanade belts. But what's interesting about this test run, this photo run for this, for this court case, is they just brought they just brought the streetcar out of Canal Station, and you can see it's still got the roll sign for the West End line, because the Palace cars, this is the big, elegant, smooth ride car was used with unpowered trailers as well on weekends to bring folks out to the West End entertainment area in West End Park and everything. So it's still running the West End sign because it was straight out of the barn. Let's talk just for a brief moment about the 1929 strike. The 1929 strike is a story in and of itself because it created so many changes in the transit system. But on the first day of this, basically the motormen and conductors, the union announced, and they announced they would strike on July 6th, 1929. Management took one Palace car out of the Canal barn and brought it into town, and this was going to be the attempt at a strike break. So they weren't hiring scabs. It was management employees. They took a Palace car out of the Canal barn and brought it all the way down to Liberty Place, and you can see there's the Liberty Monument, and you can see the cupola of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad Terminal. This is down Canal and the river. This is Eads Plaza and the Liberty. This is the Ford Bacon and Davis design terminal down there. But what happens is as the car crosses Claiborne and goes into the business district, striking workers along with family, men in support of the strikers start following the car, and they start pushing on it and they start rocking it. By the time it gets into the 400 block, 300 block of Canal, the strikers, the management folks, the motorman and conductor that were operating this car got out of the car and walked away because it was too dangerous. The strikers turned the car on its side and set it on fire. And what you're looking at is the aftermath of that. Like I said, the 29 strike is a story in and of itself that we'll talk about another time. But you can see just the horror of because these streetcars, the Palace cars were wood frame. So they set that thing on fire and it burned the interior framing of the car. So all was left is really the steel underframe in the trucks. Just horrid. As you saw though by that by the run by City Park there was a 1929 photo of belt service restored, and the Palace cars continued until the discontinuance of belt service and Esplanade becomes buses. They continue from 1931 to 1935 then on the Canal line. And by 1935, NOPSI is ready to just retire the 1902 vintage Palace cars, and they begin running the Pearly Thomas, the arch roof cars on Canal at that point. Again, the books, where we wouldn't be anywhere. I wouldn't have been able to write my book without Hennick and Charlton, and of course that's the Streetcars of New Orleans by Lewis C. Hennick and E. Harper Charlton, published in 1964. It covers the early origins of the system up to the discontinuance of streetcars on Canal, the conversion to buses in 1964. That's where these blueprints and a lot of these photos come from. Just it's a wonderful resource, still in print. If you're looking for back history on everything, these guys are your guys. There's also Streetcars of Louisiana, by the way, that Hennick and Charlton wrote. That is a survey of streetcar lines in other cities in the state. Another resource who was invaluable to me when I was doing my book in 2004 was Earl Hampton. Earl eventually, I wrote my book, and then Earl was just such a wealth of knowledge. Worked with the guys. He was always a streetcar enthusiast. Earl works for the railroad. He's retired now, but he was such a streetcar enthusiast. He had so much ephemera, memorabilia, equipment, hanging out with the guys from the rail department at Carrollton Station. He had just amassed everything. He wrote his own book. And so that becomes, instead of the Green Streetcar book, we affectionately refer to this as the Red Streetcar book, because Earl decided to pick up where Hennick and Charlton left off. Harper Charlton passed away within a year of publication of the Green Streetcar book. Earl in 2010 picks up the ball, or takes up the throttle on the streetcar, and picks up where they left off, talking about the St. Charles line from 64 up to present time, and then the Riverfront line coming back in 1988, and the Canal line coming back in 2004. And then, of course, there's New Orleans, the Canal Streetcar Line, my first history book, written for Arcadia Publishing, part of their Images of America series. Great stuff in there about the Palace cars and lots of great shots of Canal Street. This is actually a 1914 shot of Canal looking in front of the old Gacho building in the 500 block of Canal, looking lake-bound. So it's looking towards the lake there, and you can see just the level of the level of activity at the time with streetcars. And you can see there's a Palace car right there on the left-hand side in the foreground with all of those wagons in the street itself. So this is my book, published in 2004, still out there at all the usual suspects. Greetings from NOLA. Go out and support the Greetings Tour people at Greetings Tour on Instagram and greetingstour.com. These folks took inspiration from the old Kirk Tyke Greetings from Postcard series, Greetings from New Orleans, Greetings from New York City, Greetings from Brooklyn, Greetings from St. Louis. And they did the Kirk Tyke Company did these beautiful postcards that were souvenir cards with different photos, aspects, illustrations, artwork from the cities. And the Greetings Tour folk started going around. They went around the country, go find a wall someplace and paint a mural and kind of recreate or create an homage to the old Kirk-type postcards. This was their creation for New Orleans. It's on Magazine Street in St. Joseph. Just gorgeous. Just gotta love this stuff. So again, it's at Greetings Tour on Instagram. A word from your sponsor. Buy my books. Of course, we mentioned the Canal book in from 2004, Brothers of the Sacred Heart in New Orleans. There was a reason for that shout out of Esplanade and North Rampart, because that book covers the three brothers schools, St. Aloysius, Coriezu on Elysian Fields, and then my high school. I was a graduate of Brother Martin, or I am a graduate of Brother Martin High School in 1976, which also took over the Coriezu campus on Elysian Fields and Gentilly. Maison Blanche Department Stores is a story of the greatest store south, one of the big department store chains here in the city, at 901 Canal, and then out into the suburbs. New Orleans Jazz is a photo history of the origins of jazz all the way up to the traditional revival and the modern jazz movement. That's the Preservation Hall Band incarnation in 1967 in front of Preservation Hall on the front cover. The book starts with Buddy Bolden, starts with King Bolden, going into the Creole Cats, Kid Ory, King Oliver, Pops, all the way into the Sicilians, swing, trad jazz revival into modern jazz. And then the oddball cover, Legendary Locals of New Orleans. Think of it as a who's who of about 200 people who are literally legends over the 300 plus history of the city. My most recent book, which is not so recent anymore, I got to get back on that stuff. Krause, the New Orleans Value Store, published by the History Press in 2017. The History Press approached me saying, hey, it's been 20 years since Krause Department Store closed. We think we want to do a book in our lost history, our lost cities collection. And since the store had been gone 20 years, it fit the bill. So much fun researching and working on the Krause Company, which the store opened in 1903 and was there until 1997. This is at 1201 Canal. Of course, again, I'm the NOLA History Guy, at NOLA History Guy on Blue Sky, on Insta. The page on Facebook is NOLA History Guy. You can find me just about every one of these places. Thanks for being with us. We'll wrap this 4-part series next week. Shout out to the folks with the parchment, with this parchment template that I've just loved to use for the pod. And we'll check with you next time.